Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Sickler. I'm with the Small Business Administration's Office of Innovation and Technology, welcoming you this afternoon to the LabtoMarket webinar. Thank you for your time, wherever you may be during this Global Entrepreneurship Week, a very exciting week, not only across the country, but across the world as well. And today, for the first time ever, we have a compilation put together information across the federal government as relates to the LabtoMarket sphere. So really excited for today's conversation. There will be a few of us speaking, and we will be leaving time for some question and answer towards the end. So please use your question function, and we'll try to use that to spur up some exciting dialogue through today's kind of overview, not only of what is LabtoMarket, but also some resources as well. I don't know if many of you can relate, but when I initially came into the federal portion of helping innovators and working across deep technology areas, it was a challenge to learn what was relevant and when it would be helpful. It was also hard to look at the bigger picture without getting lost in the details. And so today, we've kind of put together, well, we've actually put together a lot of details that hopefully aren't too distracting. But the whole goal is helping people understand even what is available, what are some of the agencies trying to do, and then seeing where can there be linkages. For us, at least, at the SBA in our office, we work closely in the Small Business Innovation Research Portfolio, SBIR, and to have a community that's better connected and has that kind of encouragement in terms of collaboration is key. And so hopefully today is one step in that direction. To get us kicked off, I am going to turn it over here in a moment to a good friend and colleague who's going to give us more of this proper background of LabtoMarket as this cross-agency priority goal. Well, I'll let her get into the details. So Katherine has a recorded message here, but she's with us on the call today, and we'll be happy to engage with you after that. But giving a little bit more of the background of how the government has approached this work and is still working on it today. So Katherine Tyner is actually initially with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, in their Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. She's currently on a year detail supporting the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She just started here in the last month. So she's going to be working in many areas, but what we're most excited for is that she'll be in that LabtoMarket corner and helping amplify the message. And also, I think she'll be sharing some strategies and goals that will relate to the work that many of you do as well. So on that note, our Master of Ceremony, Jen, I will turn it over to you, and we'll go ahead with Katherine's portion.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to share how the U.S. government is working to ensure that our taxpayer investment in research and development is leading to a thriving economy. Advancements in medicine, communications, transportation, physics, engineering, biology, and many other fields will help us tackle the challenges of our time and allow Americans to live safer, healthier, and more economically prosperous lives. However, we need to get these innovations from the laboratory to the market in order to realize their potential. This concept of the government fostering lab-to-market isn't unique to the U.S., and it's also not unique to this time. Interest in technology transfer goes back to the formative years of the American Republic. Our founding fathers were grappling with issues such as international intellectual property sharing and the need to incentivize the domestic manufacturing industry. This quote from Alexander Hamilton's Report on Manufacturers highlights Hamilton's recommendation to apply the lessons learned from established countries like the British Empire to encourage domestic innovation in our new country. And even after 2 centuries, fostering lab-to-market activities remains important. I am here today representing the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as a White House Leadership Development Fellow, which is a program sponsored by the Executive Office of the President and supported by the Performance Improvement Council. In my role, I am supporting lab-to-market cross-agency priority efforts that require collaboration and coordination among multiple federal organizations. And there are quite a few lab-to-market activities within that federal space. These are coordinated by the National Science and Technology Council LabtoMarket Subcommittee, of which I am a co-chair, along with collaborators from NIST and DOE. The Lab-to-Market space has also been a part of the President's management agenda for multiple years now. In the current PMA, we're lucky number 14, and I will go into this PMA cap goal in a little more detail. In 2018, the President's management agenda was released, laying out a long-term vision for modernizing the federal government and to improve the ability of agencies to fulfill their missions. Just as in Hamilton's days, improving the transfer of federally funded technologies from the laboratory to the marketplace is one of those key areas. While this is a priority for the current administration, there has also been recognition that technological innovation is critical for the nation. That sentiment and spirit has been carried forward from previous administrations. What is the PMA? The President's management agenda lays out a long-term vision for modernizing the federal government in key areas, making it more efficient, effective, and improving the federal agency's abilities to deliver on mission outcomes, provide excellent customer service, effectively steward taxpayer dollars. To find out more about the PMA and current efforts, please visit the highlighted website on performance.gov. The current PMA has 14 cross-agency priorities called cap goals, and number 14 focuses on lab-to-market activities for the federal government. The focus is to improve the transfer of technology from federally funded research and development to the private sector to promote U.S. economic growth and national security, and I will be highlighting some of these activities later in my talk. Cap goal number 14 is co-led by two executive champions, the U.S. Chief Technology Officer, located here in OSTP, Michael Krastios, and from the Department of Commerce, Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technologies, Walter Kopan. I am serving as one of the implementation leads for this cap goal. This cap goal has three specific sub-goals. The first one focuses on reducing the administrative and regulatory burdens for technology transfer. And as someone who has personally spent time in the federal labs as well as administering federal grant programs, I'm a personal fan of this particular sub-goal. We also focus on developing more effective partnering models, and Jennifer Shieh, who'll be speaking after me, will go into more detail on some of the exciting activities we've had in this area. And finally, we work to improve methods for evaluating return on investment, as well as economic and national security impacts of federally funded research and development, ensuring that American tax dollars are well spent. And to give you a sense of the scope of this work, we're talking about 150 billion research and development investments each year. This is both for intramural and extramural research, the whole innovative ecosystem. All of this work is accomplished through, and could not be accomplished without, strong partnerships across the federal government with many departments and agencies, as you can see below on the left-hand side of the slide. Implementation of the various strategies relies on various committees and councils, which you can see on the right, such as the National Science and Technology Council Lab-to-Market Subcommittee that I mentioned previously, and a variety of other relevant interagency bodies and working groups. These groups implement the lab-to-market activities through 5 strategies. The first is identifying and reducing or removing regulatory impediments and creating administrative improvements in federal technology transfer policies and practices. The Department of Commerce, NIST, is leading many of these efforts with interagency working groups and committees and councils. Number 2 is increasing engagement with private sector technology development experts and investors, supporting the holistic innovation ecosystem for all partners on the chain from lab to market. And that's the focus of today's webinar. Number 3 is building a more entrepreneurial research and development workforce, a people-focused strategy where we invest not just in the technologies themselves, but in the actual people developing and marketing them. We're working to create a safe, inclusive, and diverse workforce where underrepresented groups get STEM education and can pursue careers in STEM fields. The Lab-to-Market Subcommittee has an interagency working group that's focused on ensuring that everyone has access to tech transfer trainings and resources. Number 4 is supporting innovative tools and services for technology transfer. We want to make it easier to work with the federal government across the many research and development science and engineering agencies. For example, the Federal Laboratory Consortium has a web-based searchable tool for facilities, expertise, and available technologies. Also, the Department of Energy has a lab partnering service. And finally, strategy number 5 is to improve the understanding of global science and technology trends and benchmarks. We're trying to understand and to use the trends and benchmarks to measure our return on investment of that $150 billion. This particular strategy links to another PMA CAP goal for data strategy, where we look to measure the impact of science and innovation policy to support better lab-to-market activities. Before I close, I'd like to highlight some of the recent lab-to-market activities, including the Federal Laboratory Consortium capturing COVID-19 responses with a dedicated news page, the Department of Energy's Tech Commercialization Fund via lab partnering services, which I mentioned previously, NASA publishing their Inventors Hall of Fame online, and the USPTO encouraging diverse entrepreneurs with their expanding Innovation Hub platform. And finally, the Small Business Administration prize competition that we're going to hear about shortly. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any of your questions in the panel session.
Have to undo the double mute. Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Katherine. Hi, I'm Jennifer Shieh. I'm the Chief Scientist for the Small Business Innovation Research Small Business Tech Transfer Programs, coordinated by the U.S. Small Business Administration. And I'm going to talk about, well, Katherine talked about some of the 5 key strategies for the federal lab-to-market effort. And through an interagency team effort, we actually focused in on 2 of these key strategies. Asking how might we increase connection, coordination, and collaboration across the R&D innovation ecosystem, and how might we support innovative tools and services that can improve tech transfer and better serve entrepreneurs. So we created the Lab-to-Market Inclusive Innovation Ecosystem Prize Competition. First, we went out to the community with our goals and gathered input on what would be useful and what's needed. We aimed to design the competition to respond to what we heard, one of which was that technology actually isn't necessarily the barrier. And I will say that at first, I think coming from the science and technology realm, one of the first things we often like to think about is what kind of technology can we put at the problem to improve the ability to access information from across the federal universe around lab to market. But what we heard, maybe that's not so much the problem, and really it's having the right connections and making those right connections to each other. And that was one of the key problems. And that one of the key issues too, in keeping it from being a fully inclusive ecosystem. So we launched the competition in September and invited ecosystem builders from around the country to tell us their stories and their ideas. We wanted to use this prize competition to really, as a starting point, draw out, highlight successful examples of R&D innovation ecosystems around the country, and particularly those that are including underrepresented communities and bringing them into the R&D innovation ecosystem. Really highlight some of those best practices. Of course, we are living in some very interesting times, to say the least, and some challenging times. So we also wanted to surface some of the innovative practices and solutions that are helping startups, and particularly those in the R&D innovation ecosystem, mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. Thinking about, how can we make use of this crisis in building a more inclusive community or more tech-based economic development for the future. And also, coming from the federal space and the federal community, we really wanted to enhance the use of and integration of federal resources that already exist, that are out there to support innovation ecosystems. And of course, we know that it's a challenge to navigate the bureaucracy sometimes. It is for us as well. But we were really excited and thrilled to receive so many high quality submissions. So just a summary of what we got. We had 164 unique submissions to this prize competition. 31 of them were in the ecosystem responder prize category for highlighting ecosystem builders that were particularly responsive and quick in supporting R&D innovation in this pandemic. 33 submissions to the super connector category, where we really focused on those groups and organizations that are doing a fantastic job of building the networks and making sure that they are including underrepresented communities in the R&D innovation ecosystem. And finally, we had the biggest category, which was also the largest prize amount, was the visionary prize category. And so this one was really forward-looking. We asked for ideas of how we can actually build a more inclusive R&D innovation ecosystem, and we got a great and very varied response. Everything from specific products to new programs and initiatives, and so it was really great to see the diversity of responses, and we're really excited to be able to highlight who wins when we pick that. We saw 39 different states and territories represented in the submissions, and these came from ecosystem builders of all sorts of different types: incubators, startups, government consortia, universities, national nonprofit organizations. And we really are extremely grateful for the 74 subject matter expert reviewers, judges that we had, who read through all of these submissions and gave us their expert opinion. And these subject matter expert judges came from across many different federal agencies. They came from nonprofit foundations, investors, people who care about building up the innovation ecosystem. And so what happens next? I said this prize competition, we put it out there as a starting point. We wanted to surface who are all these ecosystem builders, and what are we planning on doing next, right? Well, one of the intentions to surface the ecosystem builders was really connecting up the federal community with each other, as well as connecting up the federal community to the ecosystem. And so that's what we want to do, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brittany Sickler, to carry on.
All right, Jen. For this next portion, I'll invite you to chime in as needed, because we're going to go through a whole series of different slides across federal government. We went out to our colleagues and asked them for their support. Many of them are used to interacting with the innovation ecosystem with other stakeholders outside the federal government, as many of you on today's webinar kind of are in that area. However, some aren't as accustomed to really trying to distill it down. So regardless, we have quite a few resources. In my opinion, it's better that we have more to go through, and then we kind of do that work of trying to funnel and identify the kind of more realistic opportunities. But we're going to go through this. It's not a comprehensive list, so I do want to make that disclaimer in a sense. But it's a great place to start, and our hope today is that for those who've taken the time to be with us, that you'll find at least inspiration or a possibility. And then we've made sure to have links and or contact information so that you can follow up with the ones that might be best suited for either you or the community of entrepreneurs, researchers, innovators that you serve. So on that note, we're going to start off with the Federal Lab Consortium. Some of you might be familiar with FLC. And so coming up here just in a moment, there we go. So FLC, when you go to the website, it is rather large, but I will encourage, if you have a moment, to look around, especially in their toolkit in the FLC business. I've heard some refer to it as the Craigslist for the federal government in terms of lab resources, both human resources, testing, and other kinds of capabilities. So as I have watched the FLC the recent years, and folks have shared with me from even before that, there have been some great strides to improve how FLC not only works with small businesses, but also other partners. So you can go onto their website as well and see across the regions, individuals that hopefully you can connect with. And then also get a better feeling for what is this kind of group of federal labs. Those of you who might be in an area near a federal lab could be more kind of top of mind. I come from a place in the Midwest that was not near a federal lab at all, and so it was not familiar to me until I came to the current team that I'm on. So hopefully FLC can be a great place for you to not just look at one individual lab, but kind of look at that larger picture and be able to see where there might be a place where the entrepreneurs you're around can really connect. Next up is the Department of Energy. And so there's a couple things that I want to highlight on their slide. So Department of Energy, very large as well. Most of these agencies we're talking about today are quite large in terms of the offices that they encompass. But one thing here, the first one, that EPIC Prize, Energy Program for Innovation Clusters, you may have seen the kind of the first stage of their prize was open earlier, I believe in the summer. They're now moving into the second stage, and there is a webinar tomorrow. If you want to go, you can Google EPIC, you can go see that website address there. But if you're interested in the kind of the deep basics of that prize, you're able to learn a little bit more on tomorrow's webinar. Also wanted to just highlight here on some of the partnering service. Again, going back to labs, I think Department of Energy does an excellent job at trying to make sure that their labs are not insular, and so that there's many ways that innovators can be plugged into the labs, especially for different kinds of anything from the internships to more formal relationships. So, and the folks at DOE, as with many of the folks here kind of in our larger network, are great to speak with and love to talk about their programs. We're going to move on into NASA. NASA, just like DOE, has a whole slew of different areas that they cover, and obviously NASA is very well known outside even of our innovator and the innovation ecosystem community. Here, though, we're looking specifically at the tech transfer and partnerships area, and so this is not exhaustive as well, but you can see everything from on the SBIR side, which might be a little bit more familiar to some. However, you can look across, and even going to the other side, NASA's prize competitions are, I would say, very exciting in that they happen often. There's a wide variety of technology areas, and they're really trying to engage and bring out this creativity across the country. So everything from a recent one, I believe, was the lunar deep freeze, and they were, how do you keep things at the right temperature in space? And so they're really trying to, even if someone's not, kind of an expert in a certain area, some of the prizes are geared towards more of the ideas and being creative in their approach. And so there's a little bit of everything. So if you do look into NASA's prize competitions, I think you'd be excited to see how much they love to get outside of their area.
And I just wanted to throw in there the NASA Entrepreneurial Workforce Initiative, NEW, is one of those initiatives that Katherine was referring to, linking back to building an entrepreneurial R&D workforce. So it's not just, thinking about I-Corps, which is also highlighted here, that NASA is doing for our university partners and people outside in the startup community, but also within NASA, their scientists and engineers, they're trying to spread the entrepreneurial spirit.
Thank you, Jennifer. Glad that you can pop in here. We'll move on from NASA and head on over to the National Institutes of Health, NIH, which encompasses many different institutes, all relating to different body parts and diseases. But an exciting kind of new or newer kind of announcement here is the Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development Office, so SEED. And we even get to see the actual people involved behind the scenes in SEED to help on the small business side, helping across the academic realm, and obviously, the focus on, throughout on innovators. And so they have been building up their resources online, and so you're able to find out more there, as well as I'll be hosting a separate call on Thursday, and we'll actually be inviting Ashim and Stephanie to speak specifically on the seed office and how they want to work with ecosystem builders around the country. We're going to keep in the NIH vein and kind of go down into the National Cancer Institute. And so the National Cancer Institute's actually SBIR Center. They're one of the larger SBIR divisions of NIH. And they have some new resources that they wanted to share with us today. They have, through the years, and I believe Jen can speak to this as well, been trying to provide guidance for some of their funding programs, really trying to help innovators not only be able to work on the technologies, work on some of those solutions, but also be able to see those supported in the market. And so on the commercialization side, another thing I want to highlight also on, and I'll be highlighting this I think as well, and the National Science Foundation, but in terms of internships and working to promote diversity throughout their portfolio of entrepreneurs and innovators. All right, we'll move on, still in the Health and Human Services arena, to the Food and Drug Administration. And so here we have a list of some different ways that FDA either is providing resources or trying to reach out across the spectrum. And I think this year we haven't talked specifically about COVID. However, many folks have been working on COVID-related innovations all the way from the beginning of the year until now. There's been a lot of talk about FDA and the support and how things could be a little bit, things could improve or have improved or have shifted in that light. So we actually have, I believe we have John Carranza here on today's call that he'll be able to pop in to answer questions specific to FDA. But one thing that has impressed me has been kind of that extension to say to innovators, you know, we do really want to see things happen. How can we work around the system to make sure that what's being developed can be kind of appropriately tested and dealt with, but then also use that speed to be able to help, you know, help individual people's lives. So you'll see a wide variety of items here. And then also, if you have more specific questions, throw those into the chat and we'll make sure to cover those towards the end. Moving on to the National Science Foundation, if you'll throw a couple more clicks in there. Their engineering directorate covers many different areas, and many folks are familiar with I-Corps. They may be familiar with NSF's SBIR program, but there's a few others here to highlight today. So when you look at the IUCRC, the Industry University Cooperative Research Centers, we're looking at some of their intern programs as well. And so actually, Jen, if you wanted to pop in, I know you're often able to speak on the NSF side, but they have quite a bit of information. You'll see some of those links there below, but they're really great at being able to kind of see what's possible and try to get outside. Well, I know many people probably on the academic side are used to NSF there as well, but I am seeing them more and more kind of reach out beyond the academic realm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think maybe two things I'd flag, because these are primarily the engineering directorate programs, but I think two other programs that are outside of the engineering directorate from the National Science Foundation that would be particularly interesting to this community of ecosystem builders. One is the convergence accelerators. So really trying to use the accelerator model in academic and kind of the fundamental research process. So how do we use that idea, the startup mentality, to speed up basic R&D? And then the other is the NSF Includes effort, which is it is a very long acronym that I'm always forgetting, but it is about broadening participation in science and technology broadly, including in innovation and entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Jen. Maybe if we decide to continue the series to some extent and work with Katherine, we could do a whole call out on acronyms, how they're helpful, but also can be a challenge to nail down.
But it's good when
have...
you get the acronym. It's good when you get the acronym that is a word that also means whatever it is. So usually those are backronyms.
All right. Do you want to speak as well to the HBCU initiatives that have gone on?
Yeah, definitely. So the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities this administration has really been focused on competitiveness and increasing HBCU competitiveness. I don't necessarily see that changing, but I just wanted to highlight their website, and also that as far as the engagement of HBCUs in economic development, there were a number of efforts through a federal interagency working group and an economic development focused cluster of agencies that has put out for example, this roadmap and you can find those on the White House Initiative's website. So that might be of interest to this community.
Thank you, Jen. Next up, under the Department of Commerce, we have the Economic Development Administration, the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Many of you might be familiar with OIE for their Regional Innovation Strategies program if you've been involved in the I-6. Now rebranded as Build to Scale, and underneath Build to Scale, they're trying to have a whole slew of better better division of some of the programs that they are trying to lift up around the country that support technology-based economic development. And so this year, it's been, I would say, there's been more excitement in the fact that there are two additional opportunities on top of some of those opportunities that already exist under Build to Scale. For the STEM Talent Challenge, and then now the current running Sprint Challenge. So I'll just focus on the Sprint Challenge here for just one moment, and that does specifically speak to resilience around the COVID environment. And I believe they're taking in submissions for that challenge through the beginning of December. So you should be able to find that on eda.gov/OIE. Next up, also in the Department of Commerce umbrella is the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. If any of you have been to one of our SBIR road tours or some of our virtual events, we love to have our PTO folks come and give a larger overview of all the different resources that they have for inventors and innovators, everything from education to actual programs that help around protecting your IP, even some initiatives that help defray or deduct the cost from folks who are trying to protect their IP. And so we don't have all of their slides up here, but we do have at least highlighting across their site, trying to make it easier for people to navigate all of the different realms, all of the different pieces of the intellectual property realm. Next up, one more in the Department of Commerce is the Minority Business Development Agency, MBEA. And here as well, we don't have all of their programs, but we thought it would be helpful to see across their investments. You can see that they have their traditional business centers that support innovators, as well as advanced manufacturing centers, certain parts of the country, that have been kind of increasing their understanding and support of innovators that are working in the federal R&D space. And so it's a good thing to keep a pulse on in the MBEA world of where can you also help some of the clients or folks that you're working with or might be around, and some of the things that have come out through MBEA to really kind of speed along the process and entrepreneurs' competitiveness, especially for funding. Next up, I will reference the local assistance. Now on SBIR.gov, we're starting to really highlight across some of these programs, and that's why I kind of have this right after MBEA, the fact that across the country and in all the states and territories, there is assistance that can be hard for people to really see. And so if you go to SBIR.gov/local assistance, you can look through everything from small business development centers to PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, I mentioned MBEA, some of the Build to Scale recipients. So even if you are already, you know, an ecosystem builder that is pretty plugged in, it's possible there's other kind of groups or individuals in the area that could be providing any kind of service that is also relevant to this space. And so this is still somewhat of a work in project, a project in motion. And so we also are looking for any kind of feedback as we're trying to kind of have a better and more timely response to who is offering support and how can people reach out and get engaged with them. Next up, specific to our realm, so I didn't want to you know, have this mentioned too close to the front, but our team at SBA, as I mentioned, we work in the SBIR realm, and we also, though, have found it really hard over the years to be able to keep in touch with all of the different groups that are providing assistance, whether they're funded or not, or other entities that are interested in following everything from kind of the legislation related to innovators, related to federal R&D, and then also bring in the agencies that are kind of part of our network. And so for the last several years, we've hosted a monthly call, and this is something that is kind of and I would say a call doesn't always sound exciting, but I do want to highlight that we really do place a high value on having quality information and trying to kind of appeal to a wide spectrum of folks that are in the innovation ecosystem. And so I do invite you to join. You can see at the link there below, SBIR.gov, under support organizations. You can also reach out to me individually, and I'd be happy to add you to the list. We do have a call this Thursday, so I'll put in a plug for that. But it's a great way, and we're also trying to keep people in the loop on LabtoMarket. So it's a great way, even if you're not specific to SBIR, but if you'd like to at least kind of be in the know on what's going on, please do sign up, and we'd love to have you in the fold. So where do we go from here? As you can see, this is very introductory in a sense, in that we haven't been able to cover every program or every possibility, but being able to talk about how the federal government has structured this whole lab-to-market strategy, how all the agencies are banding together, kind of in the background, trying to work on a variety of efforts to really improve that efficiency and have those benefits be shared across the country. That can seem somewhat far out to us, and so even being able to talk about the agency programs that want to hear directly from you or would like to have that involvement, the next step. But we also want to make sure that we have an ability to communicate and see what other possibilities are in the future. So on the last slide here, we do have a place where folks can sign up to stay in touch, where you can go to see a little bit more information on kind of that back end lab-to-market cap goal. You can reach out to us on the SBA team, and hopefully we can get it to the right agency partner. And then I would like to also just remind folks that you know, there's a lot of opportunity for things to happen, whether it's on the programming side, whether it's on the partnering side. And it's great to have a wide variety of perspectives across the country to really inform those actions. And so I would love to give some encouragement that even for those of us on the federal side, all my federal partners on the call, despite some of the challenges that we may encounter, that the work is very valuable. And I think especially when we start to look at some of the successes and the individuals that are able to really transform the way that our lives are, whether it's on health, national security, and energy and space, it is the very worthwhile endeavor. And so if we can be an encouragement for each other, I think we'll really be able to take things far. So on that note, I would love to invite Jen and Katherine back to the stage, and we can move into time for questions. Jen, do you have any comments before we move on into our question portion?
No, just, you know, gratitude for everybody who's here right now, and certainly look forward to just continuing to have this expand and grow stronger and better. So, and I think our moderator, Kurien Thomas, a talented virtual student federal service intern with us, learning the ways of the government through Zoom. and Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm excited to be interning with the Virtual Federal Service and working with Jennifer and Brittany. So Jennifer, do you want me to go ahead and just list out some of the questions we've received in the Q&A? All right. Yeah. So I think one of the first ones that we received were just typically, well, we got a comment saying that especially the strategies number 2 and number 3 earlier in the presentation was very helpful, especially since people that are in the R&D sector are usually aware of some of these opportunities. Another question we received was, can you talk about the needs and issues and anything else we would need for the competition around the Bayh-Dole Act regulations?
Do you want me to take that, Jen?
Sure.
All right. So the competition that's being, oh, hi, everyone. Katherine Tyner, so now I get to see everyone. The competition that's being referred to, you can find on challenge.gov. It's called the Peer Competition, Partners Engaged in Extramural Reporting, and it's sponsored by NIST. It closes on Friday at 5 o'clock. So if you're interested, take a look and see this. And although it is sponsored by NIST, it does fall under the general LabtoMarket umbrella because it is dealing with the Bayh-Dole Act, which talks about reporting of innovation through grants and contracts that are sponsored by the federal government. And I know the question also talked about if there was any specific things to focus on during that competition. And so what I would do is suggest to please go to challenge.gov and look at the judging criteria. That's where you're going to find a lot of the places where you can focus your submissions. And good luck.
And I think the one thing I'd add there, just sort of, for those of you who might not just be in the intricacies of the Bayh-Dole Act and those regulations, what I would say is, basically, whenever the federal government goes to support research and development through funding, then it's up to the responsibility. Well, one, the Bayh-Dole Act allows the people who are doing the research to actually retain ownership of that intellectual property. And so one of the things I always like referring to in the SBIR world is the Roomba, because the underlying technology for Roomba was funded by the Department of Defense. It's like a mine-sweeping technology. But because of the Bayh-Dole Act, the company iRobot was able to maintain ownership of the intellectual property, and so they were able to develop a commercial application of what they were doing. And so it's just one of those things that allows and spurs some innovation within the free market economy we have in the U.S. So this prize competition is really about, well, how do we get people who then invent things using the federal funding? They can own that IP, but can we at least know about it? We want them to tell us more. So.
Yeah, thanks for answering those. Yeah, that's a really cool example. I didn't know about that with Roomba. All right, so another question we received was, are there any preferred educational partners, whether that's universities or vocational programs, that are feeder programs of new talent and technologies specifically geared towards the government R&D field?
So one of the things that actually, so I don't know specifically about universities or vocational programs, but I will say, just in terms of the example about a service member who's interested in getting into research and development, there are actually quite a few different resources available. The first one that comes to mind, because I have an SBIR brain, is that the National Science Foundation actually has a supplement program for veterans who have, for veterans to do research. And so basically that is also true for SBIR companies, where they can get extra funding to support a veteran that will do R&D at their company. So, I mean, to me, I like that combination of sort of this, work-based learning environment and actually getting to do some R&D in the entrepreneurial space. I don't know if Katherine or Brittany has thoughts on, other programs.
Well, going to the beginning part of the question, if we have a preferred educational partner, we don't prefer any of them. We prefer them all. We like reaching out to, and part of our goal for the LabtoMarket activities is to reach out to ones that may not be as engaged as we would hope they would be for that. But if you're looking for LabtoMarket or tech transfer, it's a big field out there. And so one of the things to look at is to see what part of tech transfer and what part of technology you're going to be focusing on, and find some federal labs or some universities there as well. The other resource I did want to point out is, again, Brittany showed this, FLC. The FLC website is phenomenal. It's a bit overwhelming because it has so much incredible, so much incredible resources to find there. And so I would direct folks to there. It has some very nice trainings, as well as some very basic information about where you can get started.
All right, thank you. Another question we received. So I think there was a comment that said the following question was asked. There was a comment that said, we love how thoughtful these strategies are, especially number 2 and 3. The biggest problem we saw in the market was that was about the awareness of these opportunities. Typically those already in the R&D ecosystem are in the know. So I guess the question is, how are we going about that? How are we addressing that?
No, I think, thanks, Kurien, and I'll just start out here, and Jen and Katherine, if you'd like to chime in as well. I think that's what drives many of us in our work, is to be able to share more so that it's not limited. We're not trying to form any cliques here of information, and in fact, the programs are stronger. Obviously, the country and the things that are developed is more incredible, the more that information is kind of dispersed. So I think one of the big challenges, though, is the fact that because people are especially if you're on the entrepreneur side, you're very busy. If you're working in a startup, there's a lot of things that are demanding your time. And if you're trying to find out something that's a great fit, it can be really hard when you're kind of confronted with long overviews or very complicated kind of pieces about different programs. And so what you're seeing a lot of agencies, though, is a push to have things more clear and cut. You're seeing a lot more of a better kind of customer experience in terms of describing and being able to target different groups. And so at least on our team, and I know with Katherine as well, they're working on a whole communication strategy to make it easier and having more of a kind of a dual communication. So it's not just sharing the message out, but hearing back. And so I'm very encouraged, and I'm hoping in this next year, especially because we were able to get everyone on board for that prize competition, that we're going to be able to continue that momentum and be able to, kind of make those connections and kind of help people see what is possible, and so that it's not just held in the hands of, the few people who have been traditionally participating in certain programs.
Yeah, and I just flagged that one of the reasons why we wanted to have the visionary category was to have that forward-looking idea that didn't rely on showing that they had past, experience or where does somebody get experience if nobody ever takes that first chance? So that included some of the organizations. We hope that we can do more probably in the future to engage new groups and organizations, because I think one of the problems for creating an inclusive network is not having siloed networks.
And I'll just jump in there too, again, just to highlight what a great thing the prize competition is that was spearheaded by Brittany and Jennifer, that the focus was trying to do this outreach to the underrepresented communities. I mean, and someone earlier in the conversation brought up veterans, which would include that. So veterans, women-owned, rural communities. And the whole idea of strategies 2 and 3 really is to get that outreach so we can incorporate the entire ecosystem and just get as many people participating as possible.
All right, thank you. Another question. So it looks like some of the participants on the call are also working in industries such as the EdTech industry. Some of them would like to know, what are some of the relevant resources in this space?
Yeah, well, so again, I'm coming from the SBIR side of things. I did want to flag that the Department of Education, through the Institute of Education and Sciences, is the agency within the Department of Education that houses their SBIR program. And Ed Metz, it's almost a one-man show, but Ed Metz is the Department of Education's SBIR program manager, and he is an amazing resource for EdTech developers. So every year for the last, are we in the 8th now? Probably not this year, unfortunately, but he's held an EdTech Expo that actually brought together many different agencies that actually support educational technologies and to the Kennedy Center, and kind of showcased their work to both other game developers as well as to students, and kind of inspiring the next generation of ed game developers, as well as teachers and educators who can use those tools.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. And I think we got one question in the chat, actually. So I think someone wants to know more about the venture capital side of this LabtoMarket process. How do VC firms get more involved, specifically with fund matching?
So I'll take this, and then Jennifer and Brittany chime in after that. But I would say, again, go back to the FLC website. There is a wonderful list that talks about some of the technologies that are available for partnering. There's also other agencies that have specific tech transfer activities and partnering activities. You can get those through the FLC website and then go into them. So Department of Energy has one, DoD has one as well. So check out the FLC, see if you can navigate to those sites, but there are multiple opportunities for venture capitalists to partner with some of the work that's coming out of these Fed-funded research.
And Brittany, I don't know if you wanted to hop in, but on the small business side, right? So the Small Business Innovation Research Program, that's 11 different federal departments funding over $4 billion worth each year of companies that are working in hard tech that would be needing some follow-on funding after this early stage investment that helps with the technical de-risking. We love partnering with venture angel investors who are able to help carry on that work, because the federal government, we help doing that early stage technical de-risking, but typically those reviews don't include the financial side of things. I mean, a little bit of that, but really we see this as a continuum and partnership. And so there's about 5,000 or 6,000 companies or projects each year that are funded through this across the federal government. And so there's a great deal flow here.
You know, I'll add, Jen, that we don't, and as I think Katherine alluded to earlier, you know, we do have a challenge in terms of not being able to endorse. And so we don't have a list necessarily of, you know, specific VCs or angel groups that are looking, at least for the SBIR realm, to fund those companies. But we are lucky that many are kind of proactive in a sense, where they are looking at certain technology areas and going kind of after some of those companies in a positive way to be able to support their work and really see that continue even after the government funding has ended. There was one remark or question in the chat. Since I'm on it, Kurien, I'll just address that now on the Small Business Investment Company Program, so SBIC. Some of you that know us more closely know that we're part of an office that also looks at investment, and the SBIC program is on the other part of that umbrella. And so what you're going to see, though, is not across the board, because there are many SBICs across the country that are funding more of these kind of mid-level companies, not necessarily your traditional Main Street companies that are going after perhaps smaller loans through the guaranteed loan programs. But many of them are not necessarily able to fund the early stage startups at the current time. But if any of you are looking at the SBIC program, Jen just put in the chat a link to check out more information. It's a fun.
Yeah, so actually that was a good follow-on to the question about how VCs can get involved, because SBICs, that program can kind of help a VC with fundraising.
Yeah, so I think those are all the questions, at least if I'm not mistaken, in the chat and in the question and answer. I just wanted to know, this year specifically is quite a different year. I just want to know from each of you, what are you excited to see about in the LabtoMarket process, whether it's the prize competition or just the cap goals, whatever it might be.
So I'll go ahead and go first. One of the things I'm very interested in and that Brittany alluded to is that the LabtoMarket subcommittee is really starting to ramp up our outreach and communication. So, and that's not just for outreach such as this into the public, but then I know it will be surprising to many people, but the federal government, different agencies don't necessarily always talk as well to each other. So we're doing both internal and external outreach, and I'm really excited to see that take off. And hopefully you'll be seeing more things from us and innovative ways to get you all connected.
I'm definitely looking forward to this next year, trying to engage more across the ecosystem builder realm, and mostly outside government, but obviously our federal partners as well. What we've seen is just some amazing things that happen when people can have those connections and really encourage that collaboration. So we have a few projects in the works to try to kind of better speak to the work that people are doing around the country, kind of elevate some of the more promising practices, and really highlight gaps in a way where it can help either us on the federal side get together or on kind of any other partners, and really look at, okay, what is taking place, what could take place, and how can we work together. So looking forward to seeing and being able to share about that in 2021. Yeah, and
I would say the same thing. So I guess I'll pick another thing, but I am excited about the same things, which is I am so excited that we have gathered together such a great community across the federal government as well as beyond the federal government. And I really think that we have a chance to bring everybody together to make a serious impact on creating, again, greater equity and inclusion in the R&D ecosystem. So thank you all for being a big part of that, and we look forward to bringing it to fruition. So
yes, thank you, Jen. And I'll just say this last note. And there was a comment earlier about the next product we should do is a Rosetta Stone in terms of the acronym. And so, I know that we want to engage more. So let us know your thoughts about today. Let us know any of those questions, and hopefully we can build up this community together. So appreciate everyone's time. Really appreciate Katherine, Jennifer, Kurien. We can't do this without a team.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.